Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into your straw sandals, tying up your travel pack, and hoisting a pair of heavy baskets over your shoulder. The air is thick with the scent of brine and old rope. You're 23, the third son in a family of 7, and today is your first day walking the salt trail. You probably won't survive this, but hey, might as well get rich trying. Your Gan Mue, sloshing softly as you move, is your lifeline. Harvested weeks ago from the flats near your village in Honghai. The salt has been sun-dried, sifted, packed into rough burlap sacks, and tied up with layers of string and superstition. A few chickens blink lazily at you. You walk as calmly as you can, but the sweat under your arms smells like fear. You chew dry rice and stare at your aching feet. A girl in a red sash walks past, humming a song about drowned merchants. You dream of salt bags bursting open into endless sea. One man with a straw hat twice the size of his head calls you Mui Nate. A century ago, someone else stood right here, salty and tired like you. Maybe even dreaming of a market where one sack could buy a silk robe. You nod. It's better than Muimje, the term for clueless rookies. Not just physically, but in all the rules it carries. A couple other traders walk by, nodding with their chins. Triple the usual price, she says, but only if you deliver by dawn. She smells like fennel and fraud. You shake your head. You smile politely. Inside, you curse his ancestors. The market's main buyer arrives with a scale the size of your arm. If he nods at your salt, you'll eat meat tonight. Each town has its own tax, its own accent, and its own version of the truth. He says he once walked to Trongse and back with salt on both shoulders. Took him 6 months, worth every blister. He bought 2 oxen with the profit. A tax clerk at one outpost asks for 2 strings of cash more than posted. You complain, and suddenly he notices your salt looks low quality. You pay. What's clear is that salt was life, and where there's life, there's someone trying to get rich. Technically, you're supposed to have a salt pass, a Giphy from the prefect. You have one, it's fake. Printed by a cousin of your uncle's friend, ink still smudged in the corner. You hand it over with a smile. You all pretend not to notice the soldier stationed at the bridge up ahead. He looks bored, but his spear is sharp. You do not sleep, you guard. Your eyes twitch at every cough. 1 sack gone now could mean no profit at all. Or worse that. A rice vendor offers you a deal on sticky cakes. You decline. In a world without refrigeration, salt is how fish stay edible in August and pork lasts through the winter. That means people will always need you. But it also means they'll always try to cheat you. Your coin bag is shrinking faster than your patience. There's a salt monopoly, you know that. The empire has its fingers deep in every crystal. Technically, you're just a middleman. The salt is legally owned by the state, priced by the state, inspected by state officials. But out here, in the fields and alleys, things are looser. The salt law bends with every conversation. One village elder once told you, Niu na trang that AI kung wan bente. Somewhere a dog whines at a wind chime. The stone road ahead splits into shadows and mist. Your first blister bubbles before noon. You're on your way to the prefecture market 4 days walk inland. Everyone says it's a good season. Prices are rising. Bandits are thinning out, and your mother gave you a lucky coin. You pass through the village gate before sunrise. By midday, your shoulders scream. Salt is heavy, heavier than you thought. The sun slips behind a hill. You rest under a banyan tree beside a dusty shrine. As you approach, he stops you. It's your first checkpoint. He squints, frowns, your heart pounds. Then he looks at your face again and shrugs. He waves you on. That night, you sleep on the wooden porch of a tea house. Historians still argue whether these early Gamui traders operated entirely outside legal channels or if they functioned as tolerated gray market facilitators. By day 2, you start counting footsteps instead of hours. Still, there's a sense of purpose now. Other merchants start recognizing you. Along the path, you spot an old milestone carved with symbols from the Han Dynasty. You pause to trace them with your fingers. You reach a larger village by twilight. Children run past with paper lanterns. Inside the market yard, you find a spot near a banyan stump and lay your salt down. A local merchant offers to buy your load immediately at a discount. Salt is not just a flavor, it's preservation. In a half-lit corner, a woman whispers about a salt deal across the river. Instead, you spread your sack covers and wait for morning. As you drift into uneasy sleep, you hear another trader muttering to himself, counting coins. You hope your own trip will buy at least a chicken, maybe two, or even something better, like respect. You wake up sore, hungry, and surprised your salt is still there. The sun creeps slowly over the clay roofs of the market village, casting a warm haze across the merchant yard. A rooster crows somewhere like it's trying too hard. You stand there like a statue. She pokes a grain between her teeth, nods, and offers you a price so low it nearly triggers your gag reflex. You counter. She laughs, tells you that rookies always think salt is gold. One vendor is selling powdered ox bone as a love charm, another is claiming his bamboo flutes summon rain. A child chases a goose through a puddle. He doesn't give his name. He inspects your remaining sacks like a bored chef. Then he gestures toward his assistant, who pulls out a heavy pouch. It clinks with real metal. You're suddenly sweating in places you didn't know could sweat. You feel the weight lift from your shoulders, not because you sold your salt, you hesitate. Then you sell. He smiles, walks off, and you never learn who he was. Maybe a restaurant supplier, maybe a tax-dodging noble, maybe a ghost. But because for the first time, you're standing in a market not as a customer, but as a player. You buy a meal rice, pickled radish, and even half a duck egg. Not war. Just city guards announcing the hour. You lie there, staring at the wooden beams above, and wonder if your life is about to change. Luxury. A local boy sits next to you and asks how much salt you carried. You tell him just enough. Some argue that loopholes and regional inconsistencies made markets like these the true backbone of salt wealth. Others insist the big profits only came when you went higher into politics, army supply contracts, or noble kitchens. He nods like he understands, even though he's clearly more interested in your duck egg. You swallow your pride and lower your price just a little. She raises hers slightly. Deal. You rub your eyes, stretch your arms, and start retying the knots on your sacks. It's market day, and you need to look like you know what you're doing. By mid-morning, the place buzzes with voices, haggling, cartwheels, and the occasional crash of pottery. You weave between traders shouting prices, farmers unloading dried mushrooms, and a man who keeps yelling peaches from the west, even though his basket clearly holds turnips. The salt section is toward the far wall, under a faded red banner that used to say something official, though now it's more bird nest than slogan. You spot your first potential buyer, a woman with silver-threaded sleeves and a ledger thicker than a rice cake. She looks over your salt with a sniff. You've sold half your load. Enough for a small profit. But you're still hoping for better from the afternoon crowd. That's when the big buyers come in, the ones with coin chests and no patience. You wander the market during the lull. The salty truth is, in ancient China, official salt markets like this were highly regulated, especially during the Tang and Song dynasties. The government could and did control supply, prices, and who could legally buy. But black markets thrived at the edges, and local officials often looked the other way, so long as their own pockets stayed nicely lined. A man with one eyebrow and 3 rings on each hand approaches you in the late afternoon. He offers you a choice: sell it all, no questions, or wait and maybe never see him again. By sunset, you're flush with copper strings and a vague sense of success. That night, you sleep in a real bed. You even pay extra for the pillow. Historians still debate how deeply the state monopolies affected local salt trade. In the middle of the night, you wake to the sound of drums. Tomorrow, you'll try something riskier. You've heard rumors of another market, bigger, richer, and more corrupt, but also more dangerous. You smile. You're getting the hang of this. You leave before dawn again, this time with no salt on your back, but a pocket full of coin and a head full of ambition. The road out of the village bends into forest, and every step hums with the rhythm of last night's decision. You duck behind ox carts, eavesdrop on tea stall gossip, and mentally tally the names of every tax officer within 50 miles. You're not just a trader now, you're a strategist. Not too heavy, not too light, just enough to suggest you know the rules. You're heading toward the provincial capital, where rumors say you can make 10 times the profit if you know who to bribe. A gatehouse painted red with 2 guards playing dice outside. They stop you, of course. Historians note that in some provinces, salt passes were nearly impossible to get without silver slipping quietly into the right sleeves. Some were sulk, some were shame. One tells you the prefect just got replaced, and now everyone's paying double. A beggar near the gate mumbles about the salt man with the golden ring. You hand over your name scroll, freshly copied by a street scribe. She doesn't even read it. She asks, "Do you have the monthly?" You nod and slide her a wrap bundle. She smiles faintly and stamps your parchment. You drop a coin into his bowl, just in case that means you. Another warns about a salt tax audit sweeping the region. Some believe the empire preferred it that way, let the bribes flow, as long as the salt flows too. You learn quickly, never talk too much, always agree politely, and never forget who took how much from you. Your profit's shrinking, but your network's growing. And if you play this right, that might be worth more than salt itself. By sunset, you're registered, taxed, permitted, and exhausted. Not rich. Not safe, but plugged in. Like a vine touching a wall and realizing it can climb, you nod and keep walking. The government knew, the officials knew, and the traders certainly knew. Everyone played the game. One has a notebook filled with bribery rates by district. Another jokes that salt traders have the best calluses and the worst handwriting. A third tells a story of a man who tried to skip a bribe once. Now he sells tofu in exile. You show them your travel pass. It's real this time. Bought it from a man in the last market whose official stamp was suspiciously moist. This is no longer about walking, it's about weaving. The first checkpoint hits faster than expected. The older guard raises an eyebrow. The younger one scratches his head and says, "This one smells like salt money." You smile and offer them each a small pouch. They wave you through. Bribery wasn't just a trick, it was a requirement. As you approach the capital, you pass more traders heading the other way. You reach the outskirts by midday. The city rises like a dragon spine, rooftops layered like fish scales, walls wide enough for carts to roll across. Inside, chaos. The capital buzzes at a different frequency. Here, merchants don't shout. They whisper. Everything smells faintly of bamboo ink and roasted chestnuts. You follow a trail of wagons to the central market, a compound guarded not by soldiers, but by clerks with ink-stained fingers. You approach the salt registration booth. A narrow-eyed woman behind the table looks up slowly. She asks for your credentials. Just like that, you're legal again. Historians still argue whether salt traders ever truly obeyed the law, or whether the entire system functioned on controlled corruption. You spend the afternoon navigating bureaucrats, each one more bored than the last. At a small tea house near the market's edge, you meet other traders. You sip your tea and realize something odd. You feel powerful. You walk home under the moon, thinking of every pouch you handed over that day. The capital market fades behind you, but its echoes linger in your steps. You've made coin, made contacts, and made a few mistakes. Now you're headed north, toward a salt caravan route that cuts through mountain passes and forest edges, where fortunes are made or stolen. Your pack is lighter, but your mission is heavier. You've joined a caravan, a ragtag group of traders, mules, bodyguards, and one man who insists on carrying a goose for luck. These journeys were long, risky, and often exploited by local lords charging road fees that smelled a lot like robbery with stamps. No one travels alone on this route. Too many stories of disappearances. The first few miles are uneventful. The forest hums with cicadas, and the trail smells of pine and horse sweat. Offerings of rice, dried fruit, and one odd coin carved with a hole shaped like a heart. You leave a piece of salted plum just in case. Someone shares dried apricots. Someone else snores so loud that a mule flinches. What is clear is that traders saw danger as both a burden and an excuse to raise prices. A merchant named Bai tells a story of a caravan ambushed 20 years ago. He says the leader had sewn silver into the saddle lining. Lin says that's a good sign. Only poor merchants smell clean. You pretend to agree. But to the idea that maybe this salt, these hills, these people might be the start of something real. Something that could grow beyond sacks and blisters. When the bandits gutted the horses, the trail ran silver and red. You notice no one laughs. Lin shows you how to tie your sack ropes to avoid shoulder bruises. The goose still honks at everyone. You lie awake, half listening to branches rustle and wondering if it's wind or something hungry. The night wind sounds like someone breathing. You exchange names or lies pretending to be names. Sue swears and offers double coin to the guard who retrieves it. Lynn stays calm and passes around pickled radish. You feel oddly proud when you catch yourself helping others repack their bags. One merchant, Sue, claims to have bribed a whole garrison once to let his salt carts pass during monsoon season. Another, Lynn, just smiles and says nothing, though her boots look far more expensive than her cart. What if you didn't just travel salt? What if you controlled it? At night, you all camp by a stream. The guards light fires in a triangle, a trick to keep animals and thieves equally nervous. Salt caravans like these were vital in ancient times. The inland provinces lacked natural salt sources, so salt had to be transported overland from the coasts or salt wells. By day 3, the road narrows. A broken bridge forces the caravan to wade through knee-deep water, where your trousers soak and leeches find bold new ambitions. Lynn laughs at your grimace and offers a handful of ash to rub on the bites. It stings but works. You talk more as the trail gets harder. Sue turns out to be funny when he's not bragging. The deeper into the hills you go, the more superstitions emerge. No one whistles, no one eats snake meat, and no one mentions the name Wying after dark. You ask why. Lynn just shakes her head and points to the trees. You pass shrines every few miles, tiny stone stacks with incense burned down to ash. Historians still debate whether the stories of bandits along these routes were exaggerated to justify armed escorts, or if the threats were truly as constant as traders claimed. That night, the firelight flickers low. You sleep with your pouch under your shirt and your hand on a stick you call a walking cane, but would gladly use as a club. In the morning, one mule is gone, stolen or spooked. There's something about shared risk that softens people. Even the goose has stopped honking. By the time you reach the halfway shrine, you smell worse than you ever have. At the shrine, you burn a joss stick and bow, not to the gods. You step back onto the path, now familiar, now yours. And somewhere deep inside, a thought takes root. You reach a roadside inn just as the sun begins to drown itself behind the hills. Your feet throb, your back protests, and your coin pouch is lighter after tipping a guard to let you pass faster that afternoon. You pay for a shared room with thick walls and a wooden bolt on the door. That bolt feels more valuable than the soup. But tonight, you're not sleeping in a field. Information is the most valuable seasoning here. Tonight, you're splurging on a roof, a mattress, and maybe even a meal that's not pickled. He tells you that tomorrow a big buyer will be passing through the next town. Others say they were just tulpas in disguise, where coins disappeared into sleeves faster than into state coffers. Fan leans in close, whispers the man's name like it's a spell, and warns you to bring your cleanest sacks and straightest smile. The town appears just before noon, bustling with ox carts and banners fluttering in the breeze. You spot the buyer's entourage immediately: 4 carts, 2 guards, and a man under a wide hat who inspects everything like it might betray him. You receive your coin and tuck it into your inner pocket. You feel ... legitimate, like someone who knows what they're doing. The inn is crooked in shape but sturdy in smell. Smoke, sweat, cabbage, and salted pork. Dressed neat, voice too formal. He asks to inspect your travel pass, then your cargo receipt, then your coin. He pinches the salt between 2 fingers, places it on his tongue, and closes his eyes. Then he names a price. Lower than you hoped, but higher than average. You nod. Over dinner, you listen. The tables are full of traders, guards, and the occasional courier with eyes like rain. They talk about road conditions, war rumors, and, of course, salt. Just in case. One man boasts that he just sold brine rights to a magistrate's cousin for triple the usual rate. Another mutters about a secret route through the canyons that cuts travel time in half if you don't to mine wolves and bribes. He glances over his shoulder, then pockets them both and hands back your papers with a cold nod. You keep quiet and absorb everything. A boy with a wooden sword practices swings nearby. His mother scolds him softly. You smile, thinking of how different his game is from your business and how similar. Your bedmate is a man named Fan. He snores like a bear in heat but knows everyone. Fan also drops a tidbit. The tax office in the next district has a new chief. Young, hungry, not yet bought, dangerous. Historians still argue whether these tax posts were tools of order or instruments of chaos. Some believe they were necessary to maintain control over the precious salt trade. The next morning, you're up early. You brush your shirt with your hand, wet your hair at the well, and practice saying your price with a confident tilt of the head. Fan gives you a thumb up and walks in the opposite direction. You'll probably never see him again. The road winds downward now, toward flatter land and bigger buyers. You make your pitch. You smile, gesture, offer a sample. The deal is sealed with an ink mark on a wood chip. But before you can bask in your glory, the tax clerk arrives, young as promised. You hesitate, just a second too long. He narrows his eyes. You slide him a small pouch. He frowns. You add a second one. You're learning the rhythm. Resistance invites trouble. Compliance buys silence. That night, you sit by the riverbank and count your coins. You should feel proud. Instead, you feel watched. One trader at the inn says something that sticks with you. The salt doesn't lie, but everyone around it does. You sleep with your coin pouch inside your boot. 3 days later, you meet the Salt Baron. Well, he doesn't call himself that. No one does. But when a man arrives in a lacquered carriage pulled by 4 white horses, escorted by guards with matching armor, and wears rings on every finger like each one owns a district, people tend to assume you're in a trade town built around a river crossing. The bridge charges tolls, the taverns charge double, and the rumors are free. Not loud, but he carries the quiet danger of someone who's seen too much and lost too little. He nods once at the tea master, then sits. You wait until the moment is right between sips, between nods and approach, with the calm of someone who has practiced walking exactly this way. Someone whispers that the Baron buys salt in bulk and stores it in his own underground cellars. When his carriage arrives, it doesn't so much park as settle, like a tiger claiming shade. 2 guards scan the crowd, and then the Baron steps out. Another says he once bribed a governor with a box of pearls just to secure a shipment. You decide to find out for yourself. You wait near the tea pavilion where he usually stops. Then he says, "What's your price, young merchant?" You buy salt by weight, not sack. Your coins vanish faster than you can track. One batch arrives spoiled damp from poor storage. Another gets delayed by a local official who insists your cart blocked his view of the moon. He's not tall. She hears what you're doing and offers help. Not out of kindness, out of business instinct. She knows you'll need strong hands and trustworthy carts. She's both. Others believe they operated with quiet approval from higher-ups, desperate for consistent supply. Salt wells, off the records, risky. You feel like a spider weaving a web from debt and charm. You offer a bow, a respectful greeting, and a sample sack, neatly folded. He gives you a scroll with a seal shaped like a turtle's shell. It's an invitation to supply 3 full carts of salt within the next moon cycle. Delivered directly to one of his storage barns, guarded, unmarked. 1 moon. You're halfway there. He nods. He doesn't speak for a full minute. You tell him. He nods, that's all. You don't know if that's a yes or a death sentence. The next morning, one of his aides visits your lodging. Historians still argue whether salt barons like this were independent powers or just highly decorated imperial agents. Some say they ran private armies. You accept, obviously. And just like that, you're no longer a small-time walker with sore feet. You're a supplier, but now you need salt. Lots of it. You spend the next days racing through contacts, calling in favors, offering generous cuts. Lynn reappears. Together, you scrape together the first cart, then the second. Then comes the third cart and the issue. Your last supplier refuses to sell unless you pay up front, in full, twice the normal price. You try to bargain, he refuses. Lynn pulls you aside. "I know a place." You look at the scroll again. You nod. The journey begins at night. The path to the secret salt wells begins under a moonless sky. You and Lynn travel light, bringing only a donkey, 2 empty carts, and a pouch stuffed with hush money. Lynn leads the way, humming a tune that sounds older than the Empire. You pass no signs, no milestones, just scattered rocks and twisted shrubs. The oldest guard missing 2 fingers finally nods, and you're allowed to lower your buckets. After half a day of silence, you see it crystallized salt patches glittering at the base of a dry basin, like the earth forgot to hide them. You haul it up, pour it into shallow pans, and let the sun do its part. The salt monopoly was sacred in many dynasties, especially under the Tang, where private production was punishable by prison or worse. But enforcement was patchy, and greed always seeped through cracks in the law. Lynn tests one with the tip of her tongue and grins. You joke that the salt is for a governor's wedding feast. He laughs, you laugh, he spits, he waves you through. Silent, watchful, quick, they inspect the salt. No words, just nods. Then one of them hands you a scroll. "Better than half the tax stuff," she says. "It's crude, it's illegal, and it's beautiful." The road curves away from the trade routes, away from safety, into a region where even the trees seem to keep secrets. Their boots are caked in salt, and their faces in suspicion. By dawn, mist hangs low over the hills. The well is shallow, ringed with broken stones, and guarded by 3 men who look like they trust no one, including each other. They carry no banners. Others think they were myths, ghost stories told by failed traders to explain missing shipments. What's certain is that many fortunes were built on salt that never paid tax. Lynn handles the talking. She speaks in riddles and prices. The salt water is thick, oily with minerals, but potent. You work through the day, hands raw, throat dry, but each pan dries into fine, sharp-edged flakes. If you're stopped, there's no bribe big enough to explain this salt. You pray to every roadside shrine. You offer coins to every innkeeper. You keep your papers clean and your eyes lower than usual. This kind of operation is technically treason. By the second day, your carts are nearly full. The guards warn you not to return too soon or too often. You nod. You pay. You leave. The way back feels longer. You're heavier, not just in load, but in fear. At one checkpoint, a guard eyes your cart for too long. Lynn exhales the breath she's been holding for half a mile. When you finally reach the storage barn, the Baron's men are waiting. It's another invitation, this time for a seat at his next merchant dinner. You made it. Historians still argue how widespread these underground wells were. Some claim entire regions survived off secret salt. That night, you and Lynn share a drink of fermented rice wine by the riverbank. She asks if you feel proud. You say, no, just exhausted. She says, good, means you're not stupid. You laugh for the first time in days. You wonder if this is what success feels like, half victory, half regret. Your hands still smell like salt. Back in the trade town, you're no longer just another dusty traveler. You have a name now. Not your real one. Names move faster when they're shaped by stories. Some call you the ghost merchant. Others say you once sold salt to a general's mistress through the palace laundry chute. You don't correct any of them. You rent a stall in the inner market. It's small, shaded, and costs more than it should, but location matters. Here, you can see the buyers before they see you. A baker wants coarse-grained salt for preserving lard. A theater troupe needs enough salt to season soup for 50 and fake sweat on stage. You sell to them all. You smile like you've never carried a bribe or lied to a border guard. You line your table with fine sacks and even a carved wooden scoop. Perception sells faster than truth. Lynn splits off to handle shipments. She's better with people who carry swords. You focus on making deals, and deals come quickly. A noblewoman buys 6 sacks for her winter pantry. Salt, once your burden, is now your disguise. Too clean, too quiet. He examines your salt, but asks nothing about it, dropping code phrases into contracts. Every sack that moves now carries tension with it. You check the corners of every room, watch the door when you speak, and flinch at loud footsteps. Instead, he hands you a sealed envelope and walks away. Still profiting, but the weight is back. You learn to talk like a merchant, not in words, but in timing, when to tilt your head, when to stay silent, when to walk away so they chase you. It's a game, and you're winning for now. Whispers that someone has been naming names. Historians still debate how much small merchants influence regional markets. Some believe these traders shape demand, spreading new grain sizes and flavors between provinces. You both say little. There's nothing to say. You knew this might come. Others claim only the monopolies mattered. But in towns like this, it was always the middlemen who moved hearts and coin purses. Then, one day, it shifts. A man approaches your stall. Inside is a warning. The new magistrate is investigating salt routes. There's talk of arrests. Rumors of a crackdown on non-sanctioned suppliers. Your hands go still. That night, you meet with Lynn in the back room of a noodle shop. You start hiding ledgers, changing delivery times. You're still selling. This is no longer trade, it's survival. You ask Lynn, do we run? She says, not yet. But her eyes say, maybe soon. The buyer arrives at dusk, cloaked in the colors of someone who does not want to be remembered. His cart is plain. His guard silent, but his coin heavy. He claims to be purchasing for a palace kitchen in the capital. Whether that's true or not, no one asks. You're too busy watching Lynn watching him. She says quietly, that's not a palace buyer. That's someone checking for cracks. You nod, but you still sell, to leave, to vanish. A barge on the river was seized, salt confiscated, crew imprisoned. Someone whispered your name, but you don't, because there's still more. The coins clink, and something inside you shifts. You've crossed the line before, but now it feels like you're walking it blindfolded, balancing on nothing but instinct and fear. That night, you count your money by lamplight. You should be satisfied. You have enough to rest for a month, more to earn. More to risk. You receive word the next morning, your name. Not a ghost, not a rumor. Lynn starts meeting suppliers alone. You start carrying a knife tucked into your belt. Not one of the nicknames. Your actual name. The market suddenly feels smaller. Every alley feels like a trap. You stop using the same stall. You move constantly. You dress in clean robes, tie your hair high, and arrive as dusk stains the walls with orange. The room smells like roasted duck and money. No one talks about price, only position. Who controls what road? Who controls which buyer? Who controls when the salt runs and when it does not? Not much, because trust is always the first thing to break. Just enough. His robe bears no seal. His fingernails are clean. The game has changed. Others believe Palace Kitchen's quietly sourced from the gray market, ensuring taste and quality while pretending purity. Historians still argue whether the palace truly cared about illicit salt. Some say imperial eyes were fixed only on taxes and tribute. One afternoon, a man approaches you with a simple request. He wants a weekly shipment, no questions, no delays. In exchange, he promises protection. You ask who he is. He smiles. Someone who eats better when your salt flows. You agree. And just like that, you're under someone's shadow. It's not official. It's not written, but it's there. A quiet understanding. You pay in salt. He pays in silence. You sleep a little easier that night. The next week, you attend the Baron's dinner. You take a seat at the long table beside traders who speak in metaphors and drink in measured sips. You realize you are no longer running alongside the salt trade. You are inside it. Lynn doesn't come to the dinner. She's guarding a warehouse now. She trusts you, which makes you nervous. The Baron makes a toast. He doesn't say your name, but he looks at you when he says loyal suppliers. You raise your cup, smile, and drink. Then you wonder for the first time how many people in this room have killed over salt. You don't remember exactly when you started giving orders instead of receiving them. One morning, you catch yourself correcting a porter for loading sacks unevenly. That afternoon, you dictate prices instead of negotiating them. By evening, you're reviewing a shipment manifest written by someone else, and your only comment is that the ink should be darker. It happens gradually, like mist turning into rain. You now own part of a salt field back near the coast. Not a large part. Not the land, but the labor. The right to harvest from 5 ponds during the dry season. You paid for it with coin, sweat, and a favor that still makes your stomach churn when you think about it. You send 2 carts a week from that operation. Lynn oversees transport. You've hired guards, hired scribes. You offer bonuses for pure salt, rest days after hard hauls, word spreads. Your salt becomes known not just for sharp taste, but sharp timing. Hired someone to pretend to be you in smaller towns, just in case your real name shows up on the wrong scroll. But with control comes problems. A storm floods 2 ponds, ruining half a week's effort. You yell, you curse. Then you realize they're re-looking at you like you no different than the men you used to fear, walking away. Starting fresh somewhere deep inland with dried fruit and silence. One worker protests a wage delay. Another cuts corners on the drying process. You adjust. The government is planning to open a new trade corridor. Inland, virgin markets. No middlemen yet. No supply chain. You begin treating your workers not as tools, but as leverage. A rival accuses you of diluting shipments. One of your guards disappears, then reappears with a black eye and no memory of how he got it. "We've risen fast," she says one night while sharpening a blade. "Too fast." That makes people nervous. Historians still debate how early private syndicates managed their workers. Some claim salt operations remained brutal and primitive until modern reforms. Others point to rare cases of self-managed teams operating under powerful patrons who understood that loyalty lasts longer than fear. You write a letter to your workers promising bonuses if they can meet demand for the launch. You start hearing things. Another merchant tries to bribe your scribe. The air is changing. Lynn notices it too. You consider selling everything, but then another opportunity appears. A magistrate's clerk approaches with a quiet deal. He wants your salt there first. You ask, why me? He says, because you move quickly, and because no one likes you enough to miss you if this goes wrong. You laugh and accept. You assign Lynn to protect the route. You gather your finest sacks, your steadiest drivers, your boldest guards. For the first time, you're not just reacting, you're expanding. And it scares you more than anything. You send out the first shipment at dawn. 6 carts, 18 mules, 30 armed escorts. Enough salt to feed a city or finance a coup. You watch them disappear over the hills like a moving whisper, and for the first time, you don't go with them. You stay behind. Delegating feels unnatural, like sleeping with both eyes closed. Still, you spend the day pacing. But you trust Lynn, and you've built this route carefully bribes ahead of time. Maps checked twice, even an astrologer consulted for the most favorable departure hour. By sunset, the first problem arrives. Demanded papers you don't have. Detained 2 carts. Claimed the salt, smelled foreign. A runner brings word. The tax station at Shangate has new leadership. The official there refused the prearranged deal. The forged document with the alternate seal. The one you swore you'd never use unless desperate. Either way, they always came at the worst times for traders. You close your eyes and count to 10. You send Lynn a message via coded courier, stall them, feed them stories, use the backup plan, the bribe wrapped in letters. You promise a minor noble in the area free salt for a year if he can convince the new gatekeeper to look the other way. He laughs, then agrees. Nobles always enjoy free things. You move salt like it's water and people treat it like wine. You're desperate now, but spoken like a crack forming in stone. You pay it and order your men to keep moving. This is what happens when the game changes faster than your grip on it. The salt glows faintly, silver in the moonlight. A worker waves. You wave back. You wonder if he knows who you are anymore. If you know who you are anymore. Historians still argue whether these abrupt policy shifts were genuine anti-corruption efforts or just power moves by rising officials. You make new calls. You cash in favors. The next morning, the detained carts are released. No apology. No explanation, just a bill for administrative delay. But now you know, this new corridor will not stay quiet. You spend the next week reinforcing the route. New guards. Faster carts, secret paths through abandoned farmland. Demand explodes. By the end of the month, your warehouses are half empty and your workers are half asleep. You don't rest either. You're too busy dodging politics. A whisper comes through the market grapevine. Your name has come up in a council meeting. Not officially. Not publicly. You visit your salt field that night. You walk between the ponds under the stars. You think of walking away again. Then you hear Lynn's voice behind you. You don't get to quit. Not after all this. You sigh. She's right, so you stay. And in the morning, you order more carts. The trouble starts with a scroll. It arrives folded neatly in a red ribbon, stamped with a prefect's seal, and delivered by a boy who looks like he hasn't eaten in 2 days. You open it slowly, as if speed could change the contents. A summons. Not a request. Not an invitation. You are to appear before the prefect's court in 5 days, charged with unlawful acquisition, unauthorized trade, and misappropriation of state minerals. Salt, they mean. But it always sounds worse when dressed in bureaucratic language. You read the scroll twice, then you burn it. Lynn reads your face before you say a word. How bad? You say, worse than the usual kind. She begins preparing. The scribe who still owes you for bailing him out. The tax clerk who once accepted a chicken as payment. The baron's aide who never looks anyone in the eye. They all offer the same answer in different tones. That night, you meet with every contact you have left. This came from high up, the kind of high that no bribe reaches. Historians still debate whether these dramatic arrests were meant as warnings or genuine justice. Some believe they were coordinated purges to reinstate control. Others argue it was just internal politics dressed up in robes and court scrolls. You don't care which it is. You could flee, disappear into the hills, change your name, start again. But what of your workers? Your salt fields? When? You built something, real or not, it matters now. You mentioned that your salt helped feed border garrisons and winter villages. You remind them of every pocket you filled, every name you never said aloud. You only care that it's your name on that paper. He simply signs a new scroll, hands it to his aide, and exits. Your options narrow by the hour. Instead, you plan. No declaration. Just a sealed pardon stamped in crimson ink. You write a speech filled with just enough regret and loyalty to sound believable. You prepare a public defense. You gather paperwork, real and fake. You call in old favors and forge new ones. And still, you prepare to run, just in case. The day arrives, you dress plainly. You ride a borrowed cart. You enter the courthouse courtyard with your head low and your shoulders straight. His robes rustle like dry leaves. He doesn't shout. He reads your charges slowly, as if tasting each word. The prefect is old. You reply with calm, clarity. You explain your records, your supply chain. It is not a trial. It is a theater. After an hour of tense silence, the prefect says nothing. You are free. No apology. You don't celebrate. You leave the building and vomit behind a fig tree. That night, you sit beside Lynn and pass her the scroll. She reads it. Then she tears it in half. We're done with courthouses, she says. You nod. Then you both start planning again. You leave the court behind, but its shadow follows you. People whisper when you pass now. Not the same whispers as before, not the his clever kind or the he bribed a prefect kind. This time it's quieter, tighter, as if they were not sure whether to admire you or stay away in case you recursed. Your salt still sells, but the smiles are fewer. So you go where the whispers can't reach. The sea. The captain doesn't ask questions. Lynn stays behind to manage the inland routes. You sit at the edge with your feet dangling, watching the green banks drift by like memories you forgot to keep. You start seeing wind-blown salt flats, shallow pools glinting like mirrors. You ask about storms, about theft, about local laws. You pay for their time with small coins and large curiosity. Villagers squat in the sun, scraping crystals into baskets. Of boatmen who toss sacks overboard at night to be retrieved later downstream. Of officials who inspect every boat except the ones they own. Children play with tiny pyramids of salt, building castles that will dissolve with the evening tide. You sleep in a bamboo shack with holes in the roof. You eat dried shrimp and warm rice from someone else's pot. You feel like a beginner again. You promise to be back in a month. Neither of you believes that. You board a grain barge headed for the southern coast, claiming to be a rice trader looking for inspiration. The journey downriver is slow. The bargemen sing old songs and spit over the side. Others say they were just villagers surviving as best they could, breaking rules that never fed them. 2 days in, small changes. More fish, more brine, more salt. You speak to the overseers. You ask about yield, labor, evaporation time. You hear stories of smugglers who pack salt into jars labeled as grain. It's something you pass to your neighbor when the river floods or when a baby is born. Historians still argue how organized the coastal smuggling rings were. Some believe they operated like secret guilds with codes and ranks. You begin to see a pattern. Here, salt is not just money. It's community. It's ritual. And something stirs inside you. You spend 2 weeks walking the flats, helping rake, helping pack, helping watch the sky. You like it? One night, an old woman hands you a pinch of salt in a cloth square. For protection, she says. You take it. You carry it back with you when you return north, not as a merchant, as something else. You return to the north with salt in your pocket and silence in your eyes. The world you left has not waited. The market has changed. Your stall has been taken over by someone younger, louder, more willing to flatter buyers with empty words. Your name still carries weight, but now it drags behind you like a tired ox. Lynn meets you at a tea house. She looks thinner, sharper. There's a long scar across her left sleeve that wasn't there before. They're taking orders from someone else. She doesn't ask where you went. She just passes you a ledger. 3 routes are still running. 1 shut down last week. Cart never came back. You read it page by page. It feels like holding your own pulse. Some say the empire tolerated a certain level of corruption as long as the revenue kept flowing. Others believe that success itself became a crime once it outshone the officials. Your inland operation is fraying. The tax officials you bribed have been reassigned. 1 was arrested. The new ones aren't taking your coin. Someone with influence. Someone who's watching. You look at Lynn, she just nods. You knew this couldn't last forever. Historians still argue how many salt traders were eventually crushed by politics instead of rivals. You consider your options: fight, flee, fade. But then a new idea comes. You visit a small village 3 days west. One with no salt field, no market, just a hill, a river, and people who still believe salt comes from gods and fog. You spend weeks there, quiet. You create varieties for preservation, for flavor, for healing. You label them with careful brushstrokes. You send samples to inns, kitchens, healers. You don't call it salt anymore. Watching, listening, learning how they store it, trade it, pray with it. You ship by basket, by hand, by friend. You use old routes, forgotten paths, and faces you trust. The empire watches for barrels. And then you return home with a plan, not to control salt. To change it, you start blending, not fraud, not deception. Innovation. You mix salt with herbs, spices, dried citrus peel. You call it a remedy, a cure, a secret, and people buy it. They don't ask about taxes. They don't ask about permits. They taste it and smile. Lynn raises an eyebrow. You reinvented salt. You say, I made it too weird to regulate. She laughs for the first time in weeks, and business somehow begins again. You no longer move in caravans. You send boxes lined with tea leaves. You're not hiding. You're transforming. And for now, it's working. You stand at the edge of your new warehouse, small, quiet, surrounded by bamboo and whispers. Inside, wooden boxes are stacked in precise rows, each labeled not with weights or quantities, but with names like Morning Heat, Winter Root, Traveler's Reserve. Officials are scrambling to redefine categories. Spice blends are in a gray zone. Your shipments, so far, remain untouched. No one calls it salt anymore, and no one regulates things they don't understand. Lynn arrives with news. The empire has issued a new edict increasing tax on salt exports. You nod, but inside, you're already thinking ahead. You've learned too much not to. You know how markets shift suddenly, like floodwater? And you know that survival isn't about holding ground. You know how power moves quietly, like fog. It's about shifting shape. You offer recipes with each shipment, brewing instructions, healing suggestions. You sell not salt, but stories. You begin sending samples south, again down the coast, across rivers, into mountain towns where no one speaks your name, but everyone wants your product. But stories like these rarely make the records. They slip between ledgers. They dissolve like salt in soup. A midwife who said your winter blend soothed a fever no herbalist could. A soldier who swears his rations taste like home now. You receive letters in return. A chef who used your blend to win favor with a regional governor. Historians still argue whether the great fortunes of the salt era were made by conquerors or creators. You don't return to the central market. You don't need to. Buyers find you, quietly, consistently. Some come with coin, some with letters of trade. Some just sit and sip tea, waiting to be offered a taste. You never expected to become a name people trust. But here you are. And still, you carry the little cloth square the old woman gave you. But sometimes, when wind catches your eye across the warehouse, you both remember the firelight, the road dust, the weight of sacks, and the silence before bribes. For protection, you don't speak of the past often. You still sell salt. But now it's yours, truly. Now let your eyes soften. The road is behind you. No more checkpoints. No more whispered names or faked scrolls. Just the soft rustle of bamboo, the quiet hush of sacks being stacked, the clink of small tools brushing powder from wooden lids. You sit beneath the eaves, listening to the wind hum across distant ponds. Somewhere, a mule brays lazily. Someone laughs. Someone stirs soup. Instead, it rests easily in your palm-shaped, flavored, familiar, nor victory, but stillness. Your hands are clean now. Your steps lighter. The salt no longer carves blisters in your shoulders. It is not wealth that soothes you. Peace that comes not from stopping, but from learning to move quietly through the world. To listen before speaking, to bend before breaking. You recall the rivers, the storm-patched roads, the nights spent sleeping beside barrels and ghosts. And yet, somehow, you made it through. Salt still clings to your fingertips. But now, it smells like ginger, like dried tangerine, like something warm. A woman's voice sings softly in a house nearby. A song you once heard on the road. You hum along without realizing it. You breathe in. You let go. And for once, there is nothing left to trade. Only rest. Only quiet. Only dreams.